People in Oregon really ought to know what's happened to Judge Vance Day. Now, I've known Vance Day for a long time. In fact, I was with him the evening that he got a phone call. We happened to be at a party where they told him, "You're going to get the spot as a judge." Now, there may have been political reasons behind why Governor John Kitzhaber appointed Judge Vance Day, but I thought he made a great choice and kind of an unusual choice in a place like Oregon. Let's face it, Oregon is a solid blue state. It's very, very liberal. And Judge Vance Day is a good, solid conservative. So you might wonder why a Democrat governor would decide to appoint a solid conservative to the bench. Well, in practical terms, for Governor Kitzhaber, it took one of the players out of play who might have been a competitor, somebody who might have run for governor or secretary of state or attorney general. It took him out of that by giving him a great job on the bench. But that's not a bad thing for Oregonians, having a great, solid conservative judge in a state that's generally full of more liberal judges, almost all of them appointed by liberal governors. Yes, the voters get a chance to vote on judges from time to time. The problem is they almost never get a chance to choose a judge originally. So what happens is liberal judges sit on the bench. When they decide to retire, they retire in the middle of their term. They allow a liberal governor to appoint their replacement, and then that judge serves to the end of a term. That means the voters never really get a choice because sitting judges are almost never removed from the bench. In this case, liberals in Oregon, I think, decided to pursue Judge Vance Day for political reasons. It's a bit ironic because Oregon voters got a chance to decide whether or not they wanted to have gay marriage. Votes were taken in 30 states around America, and every time it went to a public vote, the voters said no to gay marriage. And then the United States Supreme Court decided to overrule all those choices by all those American voters and say, we're going to force gay marriage on America, whether you like it or not, whether it's the choice of the people in that state or states. They made it a nationwide mandate, and gay marriage became the law of the land. Judge Vance Day committed, at least in the eyes of liberals, the most unforgivable kind of sin. He didn't want to perform gay marriages. Now, let's be clear. Judge Vance Day was never asked to perform a gay marriage. He never had anybody call his office and talk to his staff and say, we're going to have a wedding. It involves 2 men or 2 women, and we'd like Judge Day to perform that wedding. That never happened. What did happen was Judge Vance Day saw what the U.S. Supreme Court had done. He looked at his own religious beliefs, which he's entitled to under the U.S. Constitution. Your religious beliefs are given to us by God. In fact, all of our constitutional rights that are protected by a constitution come to us because of God. That was the belief of the founders of this country. That's what's written in the founding documents of this country. So, Judge Vance Day has a right to his own religious beliefs. He decided that in keeping with those religious beliefs, he didn't want to perform gay marriages. He has that right as well under the U.S. Constitution. And under state law in Oregon, no judge is forced to perform a marriage. Heck, you can be a judge in Oregon, you can go through an entire career on the bench and never perform a single marriage. Or you can perform marriages 2 or 3 times a week for your entire career. It's an optional part of the job. It is not forced on any judge. The liberals didn't like that, because they found out that Judge Vance Day had told his staff, if somebody inquires about a gay marriage, just tell them I would prefer not to do it. They can go to any other judge anywhere or anyone else who's capable of solemnizing a wedding. Heck, I'm registered or ordained as they call it. I can solemnize weddings, and I've done so in both Washington State and in the state of Oregon. So anybody who wanted to get married who was gay after the Supreme Court's decision could have gone to anybody in Oregon and said, I would like to be married, and the marriage could have been performed. The judge exercised his right to follow his own personal religious convictions and not perform gay marriages. And as I said, after he told his staff that, he was never asked to perform a gay marriage. So his staff and Judge Vance Day never turned anyone down. But for liberals, this was a cardinal sin. For anyone in the state not to hew to the politically correct line that gay marriage is valid, even though, remember, Oregonians rejected it. It was forced on them by the U.S. Supreme Court. There were people who decided that they wanted to get Judge Vance Day off the bench. In fact, more than that, I think that there are liberals in this state who would like to have Judge Day off the bench, disbarred, that is, no longer able to be a lawyer. They'd like to see him in jail. And they decided they had to go after him. And the way they went after him was really curious, because the kinds of complaints that usually remove somebody from the bench anywhere in America are things like financial corruption, some kind of naked violation of the law. That's not what Judge Day did. Think about the things that he's accused of doing. There was a lot made about the fact that Judge Vance Day put a portrait of Adolf Hitler in his office. Well, that wasn't true at all. What had happened was that Judge Day, for about a decade or more, had worked with veterans groups. And one of those veterans groups put together, I guess you'd call it a montage. I'm not an expert in art. But they took a picture of Adolf Hitler that had been brought back from World War II by an American service member. And then artifacts of that war, meaning dog tags, pictures of American veterans, unit patches that you would wear on your uniform to indicate what kind of service you had done during World War II. All of these different artifacts were placed in the frame on top of the picture of Adolf Hitler. What was that? Well, again, I'm not an expert in art, but to me what it said was, this was evil incarnate. Adolf Hitler, responsible for the murders of more than 12 million people, including 6 million Jewish people, a man who tried to take over the world, who waged a war that cost 50 or 60 million lives. That judge had a portrait of the man behind that terrible, terrible crime, and the things on top of the picture indicated the local veterans who had fought in that war to defeat that evil. Now that's a positive image, but if you simply say, as a lot of the news media said, Judge Vance Day is accused of hanging a portrait of Adolf Hitler in his office, not in his chambers, mind you, that sounds horrible until you know what's behind it, veterans, the message that it carries, that Adolf Hitler was bad, but there were good men and women from America who defeated Adolf Hitler. That's the image that was hanging in his chambers, but that was one of the complaints they had about Judge Vance Day. They also complained about the fact that he went out to help a veteran who'd come home from one of the wars and had a drinking problem. Now, that's a sympathetic thing. My dad had a drinking problem his entire life. He was an alcoholic. So Judge Vance Day decided to help this man. The man had run into trouble. He'd had DUIs, and he even at one point had a felony on his record because of DUIs, even though that felony was later erased because Judge Vance Day helped that veteran get back on the path to sobriety and to following the law. So that felony is no longer on the man's record. But at the time he was a felon, the laws in Oregon make it illegal for a felon to possess a firearm. And they make it a crime if somebody like me or Judge Vance Day hands that felon a weapon. Did Judge Vance Day hand the man a gun? No. Judge Vance Day went out one day to help the veteran fix the wood stove in his home that was malfunctioning. This is a man who lived in very meager surroundings. He lived in a very tiny house in Marion County out near Staten. And his wood stove had malfunctioned. It was his only source of heat in the middle of the cold. So the judge went out to go out and do some monkey wrenching on that wood stove and see if he could get that pellet stove working again. While the judge was there, the judge's son, who had a brand new pistol and wanted to show it off to this veteran who knew something about guns because of his service in the United States military, he showed the man the gun. The gun was not loaded. They didn't at that time fire the gun, and that was the crime. And there were other issues as well. They brought a bill of particulars against Judge Vance Day that listed dozens of items because to the people in Oregon, to the politically correct, they couldn't stand the idea that this judge had a different idea about gay marriage than they did, even though by the last vote it was the idea and the beliefs of the majority of Oregonians who didn't believe that gay marriage should be made legal. But the judge understood that it had been made legal by the Supreme Court's actions, and he chose not to participate, which is his right as an American, even his right even though you're a judge. And because of that, they decided that they wanted to go after Judge Day and they wanted to destroy him. Destroy him in every way but killing him. Take his job, take his profession, take his position on the bench, and especially take away all of his credibility. Because if Judge Vance Day ever wanted to be involved in politics again, if he ever wanted to run for public office with a record that's been made by the mainstream media, a record of hanging a portrait of Hitler, a record of refusing to do gay marriages, even though neither one of those is true, it would be impossible. And I'm not saying that I know what Judge Vance Day's plans are in the future, but he's been involved in politics before. He's headed the Republican Party, and certainly being a judge is a political position. But they would effectively destroy Judge Day's position, his status in the community, his ability to run for public office. They would take from him everything that would be important, even down to his ability to earn a living. And that's exactly what they wanted to do to Judge Vance Day. And that's why it's so important to fight this battle, because the only way to win this is to win in the court of public opinion. And to do that, you have to be able to get a message out. And the problem is the mainstream media in the state of Oregon dances to the same sheet of music. The problem is that most of the reporters, and I was a reporter at one point, go out and they tell the same story. They're not willing to tell the other side of the story and explain that there are political motivations behind this jihad against Judge Vance Day. They want to destroy this man, and it's important that people hear the truth and that they understand they're not going to get the truth from this fake stream news media that's only going to tell what the politically correct message is. And in Oregon, the message is you've stepped across the line. You've refused to do a gay wedding, even though you're not required to do a gay wedding, and you never turned anybody down for a gay wedding. It's important to the people in this state that they understand what's being done to this man. And I'm going to imperfectly quote Bishop Niemöller. He was a man who, during World War II, made a comment about the attitudes of people when the Nazis arrived. And he said words to this effect. I can't quote it precisely. When they came for the socialist workers, I didn't stand up and say anything because I wasn't one of the socialist workers. And when they came for the Catholics, I didn't stand up and object because I wasn't Catholic. When they came for the gays, I didn't say anything because I wasn't gay. And when they came for the Jews, I didn't speak a word because I wasn't Jewish. And by the time they came for me, there was nobody left to stand up and object. That's why this story is so important, and it's so important that we get the story out in front of people and that they understand the facts and understand that going after a man and trying to destroy his life simply because of his personally held religious beliefs, beliefs that he didn't seek to impose on anybody from the bench. He wasn't trying to say that from the bench he was going to lecture people on Christians or the Bible or the Savior Jesus Christ. He simply said, I don't want to take part in a gay wedding because it violates my beliefs. Now, we respect that attitude. If a Muslim man or woman says, I don't want to eat a ham sandwich because it violates my beliefs, we respect that. If we say that a Jewish man says, I don't want to work after sundown on Friday night because it's Sabbath and it violates my beliefs, we respect that. There have even been professional basketball players who say, I won't play basketball games on Friday night because it's during Sabbath and it violates my beliefs. We respect the beliefs of all those people. And in fact, I respect the beliefs if people want to engage in private, personal, sexual behavior between consenting adults behind closed doors. That's where we do it, in the bedroom, not out in public. I respect their right to do that. I don't want to interfere with that. I don't want the government to interfere with that. I don't want private organizations to interfere with that. And yet this man, Judge Vance Day, because of personal beliefs that he kept personal, merely saying, I don't want to take part in something that violates my closely held religious beliefs, they've decided that they want to destroy him. And they're well on the way to doing it if we don't get the real story out in front of people. One of the ways to get Judge Vance Day's story out in front of people so you can understand what happened to him, what the perils are that are posed not just to Vance Day, but to people like you and people like me, is to tell his story through a documentary like this one. And documentaries like this one, I've done documentaries before, used to be one of the things I did in television. They don't come without money and resources. And if a documentary doesn't have support, it can't get out in front of the public. But if it does, documentaries are a great way, and again, I say this having done them myself, documentaries are a great way of being able to bring a lot of information together, put it into a system so that you can understand what happened in that story and understand all aspects of that story. Documentaries like that don't happen without public support, and I'm asking for your support for this documentary so that you can see what happened both in front of the scenes, the images that you might have seen on television news or heard about on the radio about Judge Vance Day, and also what happened behind the scenes. Because an awful lot of this story has to do with the political agenda that was operating behind the scenes in Oregon government, including, I think, all the way up to and including the governor, the attorney general, and other major players in government who decided that they wanted to go after Judge Vance Day, and they wouldn't stop until they had removed him from office and destroyed his public reputation. That's why having a documentary version of this story to tell you all angles of this story is so very important. So I'm asking for your support for this documentary.